Okay. Can I ask first of all, Mr. O'Shea and Mr. Fitzgerald, are you aware, first of all, and if you are, did you see the Primetime Investigates programme that was aired after the last Public Accounts Committee hearing, in which you, Mr. O'Shea, were present, Mr. Fitzgerald, you were not, but have you both seen the programme, or are you aware of the contents of the programme?
I'm aware of the contents. I have not seen it. I was at another event that evening.
Thank you.
I saw the programme.
You saw the programme.
Yeah.
Mr. Collins, did you see the programme?
I did. Watched
you did.
It. Yeah.
Can I ask Mr. O'Shea, Mr. Collins and Mr. Fitzgerald, would it be your view that your organisation, specifically you, Mr. Collins and Mr. O'Shea, you were before the committee the last time, were you truthful in the answers that were given to members of the Public Accounts Committee at the last hearing, in your view?
I believe that's true.
You believe you were truthful, Mr. O'Shea?
I believe I was.
And Mr. Collins,
exactly
you
right.
believe you were truthful and factual in the information that you gave? Yeah. And Mr. Fitzgerald, in relation to representatives of your organisation that were here, do you believe they were truthful?
I think they were incomplete in the answers that they gave, particularly in reference to the severance agreement.
Who specifically gave incomplete information, please, Mr. Fitzgerald?
I'm sorry?
Who specifically gave incomplete information when you were witnesses before
our finance director.
The finance director.
Yeah. But I understand that the record was corrected afterwards.
But notwithstanding the record being corrected, you are now the accounting officer. So if your finance director is coming before the Public Accounts Committee and giving this committee incomplete information, what sanction would there be then for such instances? What have you done since then? What contact have you had with that individual?
Well, as I met with the individual the following day and initiated with the Audit and Risk Committee an internal audit. I'm not going to rush to judgment on what has happened, because I think, given that there is concern about the information that's been provided to public bodies, and given that we need to have complete clarity on what has been said and done within the institution, I am determined to get the information, to get it independently, to review the information, and then take whatever appropriate steps are
Okay, thank you. Can I just note as well, Caherlock, that it was you on the same programme who said, and I quote, "There is a severe lack of corporate governance shown by these governing bodies of these organisations." And when they did come before us, which was a number of institutes, they didn't tell the full truth. And they were your words. So I think a number of allegations have been made by the programme as well that we did not get full information. So that's what we need to examine here today, Mr. O'Shea, Mr. Collins and Mr. Fitzgerald. But at least you have acknowledged that there was incomplete information given by representatives of your organisation, Mr. Fitzgerald. So thank you for that. So I can start then with you, Mr. O'Shea, and your opening statement where you say no taxpayer or exchequer funds of any kind were used by the university to acquire the IMI. Was any taxpayer money used, or any funds from your organisation used to pay for or discharge borrowings, working capital or liabilities?
I'll let my colleague answer that.
I'm asking you first, Mr. O'Shea.
My understanding is no, and my colleague can give you details on that.
Yeah, okay, thanks, President. Yeah, we supplied some supporting schedules for you to hopefully they're available to you. But the Schedule 3, which is a transaction overview, sets out the transaction itself. So that's on your papers. It addresses, I suppose, in particular, the points that the programme made and the points that we made at the last session here on the 30th of March. So we purchased the IMI Sandford campus, just over 13 acres. That was based on professional evaluation. 20 million was used. We advised the committee at the last meeting, and subsequent in writing follow-up, that was funded via borrowings. So again, there was no public monies involved. There was no exchequer monies provided to UCC for us to acquire that asset. The third bullet there, and again that's consistent with what we said previously, and there's supporting documentation in our papers under Schedule A confirming this. IMI, with that 20 million, discharged 2 charges that were on that campus. A charge, in effect, were mortgages. So they had developed a residential aspect of their offering that had been supported and financed by EIB Bank. So with an element of our 20 million proceeds that we bought the campus with, that mortgage was released, discharged and paid back. And in 2012, and this is I suppose a key point, because when we looked at the IMI previously and looked to acquire the IMI, the existence back then of a pension liability prevented us going ahead. We did not want to take on a pension liability of a private entity, and we paused at that time, continued with the alliance and revisited when that was resolved. It was resolved in 2012. It's confirmed that the documentation attached in the accounts, in the report we got from Mercer's pension expertise, and in our due diligence with PwC, and that charge was also paid with the 20 million from UCC.
And sorry, Mr. Collins, the 20 million euro then that was funded via borrowings. Who
Correct.
borrowed the 20 million?
Yeah, UCC borrowed 20 million. So
UCC, and UCC is a taxpayer-funded organisation.
Well, at this stage, I suppose over the years our funding sources have diversified. At this stage, the majority of our income comes from non-exchequer sources.
I'm not asking that. What I'm saying, Mr. Collins, is that your organisation, and I put this to Mr. O'Shea, sorry, Mr. O'Shea, your organisation, you are the accounting officer. Are you telling me that your organisation borrowed 20 million euro to purchase the 13 acres?
That's correct.
Yeah. And who then would underwrite those borrowings?
I'll do that. Thank you. The borrowing framework, the model of borrowing that we work within, the borrowing framework model, allows the university to borrow for organisations or entities that are themselves self-sustaining. So this,
that's with respect, and we have very limited time.
Yeah, okay.
I understand that. I'm saying when an institute, which is funded by the taxpayer, borrows 20 million euro, who underwrites that borrowing?
The university.
And if then there was a difficulty in repaying that, it would be the university, and we funded as taxpayers would have to fund that. Isn't that correct?
Yeah. We have acquired an asset, I suppose, for us.
So the taxpayer then underwrote borrowings for the purchase of IMI.
No, the university itself.
And the university is funded by taxpayers.
It's part funded by the taxpayer at this stage. The bulk, as I've said, the majority of our money.
In the main, it's funded by taxpayers.
No, not in the main. In the main, it's funded by non-taxpayers at this stage. That's the reality of the level of funding support we receive from the state today. It's dropped since 2008-09 from our early 70% to below 50% currently.
And the rest of the money comes from
the rest comes from students, students themselves, research, industry, international students, commercial income, and so forth. So the university underpins that borrowings. We leased the campus back. The asset was leased back to IMI. So now we have the asset in UCC. It's leased back to IMI. The lease payment, the income that we get in UCC, then goes to pay that borrowing that we have back to the bank, back to Ulster Bank. We bought the campus, leased it back. The lease payment from IMI into UCC, which is new income that we've never got before, goes to service those borrowings. Like for us, if we compare where we are now and where we were pre the acquisition, the university has an asset that's appreciating, 13 acres, 20 million, that's the reality. Other recent sales of assets, I suppose, adjacent to Sandyford show it worth arguably more than that. So we have an asset appreciating. We have a business that it provides executive education that we didn't have before, and we have a better ability to deliver on lifelong learning. One of the key objectives set out for the University and Universities Act, our ability now to do that, particularly in the business space, is far better enhanced.
With respect to Mr. Collins, I don't think we need that level of information, so I've got enough now at this point on that, and I want to move to Mr. Love. Is it the case that the HEA would have instructed UCC to postpone the IMI takeover at some point?
There was, yes, Deputy.
Can you explain to us why you would have given that instruction?
If I can summarise it very quickly and explain that in fact we had done the due diligence on this deal and approved it, and if I can hold our hand up and say we had not processed the paperwork that weekend that was covered in the RTE documentary sufficiently on time to effectively hand over and approve it. Our interim chief executive then, Anne Looney, did so over the weekend with the then president of UCC, such that the paperwork was completed early that Monday morning. We were in a position to say the deal was good. We hadn't concluded the paperwork, hand up on that front. But in fact, we were satisfied the deal was okay.
So it was just an administrative issue, then,
correct,
more so than that you had issues with
correct.
the actual liabilities. Okay. So, 10 minutes, Rob. Okay, and just one final question then to yourself, is in relation, Mr. Collins, in relation to the pension liabilities. Are you saying then that there was no pension liabilities for that UCC would have had to pay in respect of the IMI?
Yeah, that's correct. Pension liabilities with the IMI were resolved in 2012, so they entered into arrangement with their pension trustees in 2012. The trustees took on future ongoing pension liabilities, and in return the IMI gave them a charge.
Is there any future pension liabilities that where UCC will incur a cost?
No. Future pension liabilities are now responsibility of the IMI pension trustees.
And what about the 1.4 million pension liability for the former CEO, Larry Kenny, who was liable for that? You want to make just one reference on that first before I speak about that? Yeah. This was a brand new agreement that was built into the UCC deal as part of a High Court settlement, is that correct?
It was a settlement between the individual concerned and the IMI, but just in advance of...
Was it a brand new agreement?
It's a brand new agreement in the sense that it was a High Court settlement in 2016, but it's a continuation of an agreement that was put in place in 2004.
And who is liable for that?
The IMI.
And who the IMI is? So
yeah.
UCC would not be?
UCC is not liable for that.
Okay.
No.
Why is it then there was a UCC statement? I'm not sure who issued this. Was it yourself, Mr. O'Shea, would have given clearance to it when you were asked by Primetime Investigates to respond to the programme? You said the PAC did not request any briefing in advance in relation to IMI. Furthermore, it is impossible in the course of 10 minutes allocated to give full detail of a complex transaction. Who wrote that?
That was written by us.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you were saying it was impossible in the course of 10 minutes allocated to give full detail, would suggest to me the full detail was not given.
Maybe comment on that. Part of the, I suppose, the pressure to finalise the process on the weekend that the CEO of the HA mentions. There are 40 documents in the Bible of documents that were concluded on Monday morning, that the 21st of November, when this was completed. That's the kind of complexity, I suppose, that we were referring to when we were asked to respond here, and having had no advance notice of it, that's where the comment on complexity comes from. It was a complex process. Control of the company was signed over from the members of the IMI to UCC. There was an asset purchase and a lot of, I suppose, legal documentation negotiated over the 2-year period. That's the complexity, I suppose, we're referring to when we say it was a complex process, and in the space of 10 minutes unprepared, it was difficult. It's difficult to get that complexity across. It doesn't mean there was anything inaccurate said.
We were prepared for that meeting on the basis that it was focusing on the 2013-14 accounts. The IMI transaction only concluded in 16, so we didn't anticipate it coming up on the day. Okay,
I want to move to, thank you to the witnesses. I want to move to Mr. Fitzgerald. First of all, before I do, can I ask the Controller and Auditor General, did you see the RTE Investigates programme?
I did.
You did, and were you concerned at all in relation to issues where there were severance payments that would have been potentially disclosed to your office in the past, but not necessarily then people being rehired to do consultancy work? Would that have been something that you were aware of?
It isn't something I was aware of.
What were? Can you tell us what you would have been aware of, or what the organisation would have made you aware of?
Well, we reported in the special report on severance payments, which was considered by the committee previously. We completed it in December 2015, and it was examined by the committee last year, I think. In relation to what one of the chapters deals with discretionary severance payments, and we had referred to 2 severance payments which I think subsequently came into the public domain, our University of Limerick severance cases. We represented in the report our understanding gained from the university of the nature of the severance payments. We understood that the information we had was complete.
And was it complete?
Well, I'm actually pursuing further inquiries with the University of Limerick in relation to that, and I don't want to prejudge.
But you certainly were not given in.
But I certainly have concerns that it may not have been complete.
Okay, Mr. Bashar, can you respond to that, please?
Well, I'm in the same position in terms of collecting the information at the moment through the internal audit which has been performed by Deloitte. They're external, but they're our internal auditors. As I said earlier, I'm unhappy with the scale of the severances. In particular, it's now pretty clear that the consultancy arrangements were part of the severance.
And I think, given the responses from Mr. McCarthy and Mr. Fitzgerald, that unfortunately we're going to have to come back to this issue, because and I accept that there is examinations being carried out within the Institute and the Controller's Office, but these were the issues that were raised. These are issues we want dealt with today. If we're not in the position to deal with them today, we are going to have to come back to them. But I just want to put another question to Mr. Fitzgerald. You will understand that there is government pay policy, codes of conduct and procurement rules which organisations have to live up to. In terms of government pay policy and codes of conduct, are you satisfied that those arrangements that are in place for a reason were followed by your organisation?
I'm not, but I'm not in a position just yet to go into any detail on that. As I said, we're still collecting the information, and both through the internal auditor and also through the external review. And I would think that we should. I don't want to rush to judgment with this. I would like to have the information to make a decision as to what happened, and then base my answer on that.
Okay, my final question, Coherent, is two parts to it, is in relation to conflicts of interest and management of conflicts of interest, which is one of the issues which we have raised generically for all of the institutes. And there's a number of examples which have been brought to our attention, Mr. Fitzgerald. One is in relation to Mr. John Field. Who is Mr. John Field?
He's the head of finance.
The head of finance. This is the same individual that you had to have a conversation with, is it not, after the Crime to Investigate's programme? Is he one of those who would have signed off on a statement of compliance on behalf of the governing authority? Would have to sign off on compliance statements for procurement and so on? Would that be one of his functions?
He would have set up the procurement process within the institution, but my understanding is that these procurements would not have come to the attention of the governing authority.
Are you aware of a company called Maverick Communications International Limited?
I am, yes.
Are you aware that Mr. Field was a shareholder in that company?
I'm aware of that.
Are you aware that he failed to disclose that?
I'm aware of that.
So what action have you taken, given that you now know he did not disclose it, and we also know that that company completed for tenders and sold more than €200,000 worth of business to UL?
I am looking at the issue of the conflict of interest through the internal auditor.
And is that something that's also now part of an examination?
It is, yes.
Okay. Who is Mr. Tommy Foy?
He's the head of human resources.
Human resources. He's a director as well, is he not?
A director.
And he would have contacted a number of shops to get quotes for engraved cross pens and watches for people who were retired at a cost of, I think it was €69,800. Is that correct? There was also then €42,000 more worth of customised silver medallions for retirees as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that was €110,000 worth of business to one shop. Isn't that correct?
My understanding from the auditor, it's €91,000.
91,000. And tell me, the shop then in question, who owns that shop?
One of the members of the governing authority, Mr.
Tyke Carney, isn't it?
That's correct.
And what's his role?
He's a member of the governing authority.
A member of?
The governing authority of the University of Limerick.
Did he declare any interest, conflict of interest?
He did not.
He did not?
No.
Would that, is that something you would expect him to do?
Well, I've looked at the policy for conflict of interest for the governing authority, and I think the approach has been very much that it's up to the individual to declare conflicts of interest. In my mind, I think we need to have a very good look at the governance within the institution, and in that particular case of declaring conflicts of interest, it's not what the individual thinks is a conflict of interest, it's what a third party believes is a conflict of interest.
This is a problem that we have, Cahill, and maybe it's something we're going to have to come back to. If we have accounting officers who come in and say, well, it's really up to the individual involved, and if they do it or don't do it, that's a matter for them, in my view, doesn't cut it.
That is not what I said.
I'm not saying that's
what I'm saying is that there is a review of the governance which has been initiated by the governing authority.
Yeah.
They are one of the issues. That is one of the issues that we're going to look at very carefully. And the issue, in my mind, is that what is considered to be a conflict of interest within the institution is often.
I'm asking you now, Mr. Fitzgerald, because you were aware of it. You were before the Public Accounts Committee. You are an accounting officer. I've put the point to you that I believe there was a conflict of interest that should have been declared. Whatever your view might be, or the individual's view, I'm giving you my view. So what I'm asking you now that you have been made aware of that, what course of action have you already taken, or what course of action will you take to examine whether or not conflicts of interest were properly dealt with in this instance?
And as I said, the governing authority has initiated a review of the governance in the institution, and that would include the conflicts of interest.
That's generic, right? I'm talking about specifically in relation to this potential breach of conflict of interest, if there was a breach. What specifically are you going to do about that issue? Not a generic review of conflicts of interest. We're aware now of a specific issue.
I'm sorry, I thought I'd answered the question earlier on. Part of the internal audit that's going on at the moment, there are three elements to it, as I mentioned earlier on. One of them is conflict of interest, in the particular instances that came up in the RTE programme.
And will this be one of them?
This is one of them, yes.
It is one of them, okay. Thank you for that.